"You'll forever dwell beneath my shadow," my elder brother Nathan proclaimed, his words landing on the dining table with the subtle force of a tossed pebble. His smile was smug, a slow, assured curve of his mouth that drove the barb deeper. He lifted his glass of Cabernet, a quiet salute to his own declaration, as if it were an unassailable truth carved in granite. The scene around him was one of meticulously crafted familial harmony. Our mother busied herself with the pot roast. Our father laughed off what he saw as playful siblings sparring, the chandelier's soft glow bouncing off the polished cutlery. To them, Nathan's remark was just part of the usual script, the familiar repartee between their shining star and his reserved, understated younger sibling. They didn't catch the venom in his voice, the glint of victory in his gaze. They didn't sense the familiar, nauseating knot in my stomach, the creeping burn of humiliation that was my reflex to his presence. I stared at the delicate vine pattern on my plate, my steak cooling untouched. For 28 years, I had existed in that shadow, a cool, comforting, yet stifling place where my successes were mere asides to his triumphs, my aspirations dismissed as faint echoes of his own. He was the one who clinched partner first, who bought the lakeside estate, whose life was a string of seamless wins our parents recounted with fervent pride. I was the dependable one, the consistent one, the one who was doing fine in another city, far enough away that my dimmer glow wouldn't dim his radiance. Tonight, his triumph was landing a final round interview for a vice president role at Pinnacle Crest Financial, the state's most elite investment firm. "It's all but guaranteed," he'd bragged over hors d'oeuvres. "They sought me out, Crest himself is personally invested." His eyes met mine then, heavy with a mix of condescension and pity. "Once I'm settled, I could probably find you a spot in my division. Something entry-level to get you into the big game." The offer was a veiled insult dressed as generosity. And in that moment, beneath the warm, adoring gaze of my family who saw a hero, I saw a despot who needed toppling. I slid my chair back, my hunger gone. "Well done, Nathan," I said, my voice steady, revealing nothing. "You've earned it." He accepted the praise as his right, already turning to our father to discuss market trends. As I helped clear the dishes later, his words haunted me. "You'll forever dwell beneath my shadow." I scraped my uneaten dinner into the trash, and with it, I discarded the last traces of the person I was expected to be. The vow I made was not loud or theatrical. It was a quiet, icy recalibration of my entire being. The shadow wasn't my refuge, it was my proving ground. The next morning, the air on the 40th floor of the Pinnacle Crest Tower was a different realm. It was crisp, sterile, scented with filtered air, fine leather, and the faint hum of vast wealth. I sat at the head of a sleek obsidian conference table, its surface so glossy it mirrored a stretched, distorted version of me. My suit wasn't as costly as Nathan's would be, but it was impeccably fitted. My hands rested calmly on the cool surface. Before me lay a single dossier, Nathan's resume, alongside my notes. I was no longer the man from the dinner table. That man was a specter. I was Lucas Crest, senior director for the firm's global expansion program, a role I'd fought tooth and nail for over the past 18 months, working directly under the firm's co-founder, Julian Crest, the man Nathan had name-dropped with such reverence. The truth was, Nathan hadn't been recruited. He'd merely applied like countless others. His resume was strong enough to pass the initial screenings, but it was I who had flagged it for Mr. Crest. It was I who had suggested that my brother, a man I knew better than anyone, might be a contender for the VP position that would report directly to me. It was a meticulous, patient, and calculated snare, and the final piece was about to enter the room. The door swung open. Nathan walked in, exuding tailored assurance. He radiated the smooth, commanding charisma that had always been his greatest weapon. His custom suit, his polished loafers, and a smile that said he wasn't here to request a job but to claim it. His gaze swept the room, landing first on the junior HR associate in the corner, then moving to the head of the table. To me, the smile didn't just waver, it collapsed, fracturing into disbelief. He stopped mid-step, his hand still gripping the sleek door handle. The confident posture, the lifetime of unearned dominance, crumbled in an instant. His face paled, ashen and waxen. He looked as if he'd seen a phantom, and in a way, he had. He was seeing the ghost of the brother he thought he'd left behind, seated in the position of authority. He stared, his mouth working soundlessly, his mind racing to solve an impossible puzzle. I let the silence linger, relishing it. It was the first time in our lives that silence was my tool, not his. "Nathan," I said, my voice measured, betraying none of the decades of rage simmering just below the surface. It was the voice of a superior, composed and in control. "Welcome, please take a seat. We can begin." He stumbled forward, as if his limbs were failing him, collapsing into the cushioned leather chair across from me. The sleek portfolio he carried slipped from his limp fingers, landing on the thick carpet with a soft, pitiful thud. His eyes stayed locked on me, wide with frantic, desperate questions. I offered no answers. The junior rep, a young woman named Elise, glanced between us, sensing the tension but not its origin. I gave her a slight nod, signaling my command of the situation. "Elise, thank you for being here. I'll be conducting this final stage behavioral evaluation." She nodded and retreated further into the background, opening her laptop to take notes. I opened the dossier before me, though I didn't need it. I knew every detail by heart. "So, Nathan," I began, my tone the epitome of professional detachment, "your resume is certainly notable. A solid history of career progression. But at Pinnacle Crest, we value character and leadership ethos as much as we do results. So let's start with a standard question. Describe a time you led a team through a major unforeseen challenge." He was still reeling, but the question, familiar as it was, seemed to offer a lifeline. He cleared his throat, trying to piece together his shattered poise. "Of course," he faltered, his voice unsteady. "In my previous role, we faced an abrupt market shift, and I had to steer my team to adjust our approach." He launched into a rehearsed, generic tale. I let him speak a few lines before raising a hand, a subtle, dismissive motion that silenced him mid-sentence. "I appreciate the example, but I'd like to dig deeper to truly grasp your natural problem-solving instincts. Let's go back further. Tell me about the Meridian Project, University, your final year." The name hung between us like a toxin. I watched him, my face impassive. He flinched. A slight tightening around his eyes. He remembered. Of course he remembered. The Meridian Project was our senior year thesis, a group effort worth 60% of our grade. I was the team leader. 2 days before the presentation, my laptop failed, its drive wiped clean. Every piece of our research, our data, our final draft gone. I'd spent 48 sleepless hours, fueled by coffee and desperation, reconstructing it from fragments of notes and memory. We passed. But my chance at a distinction, the one I'd worked for all year, was gone. Nathan, who'd barely contributed, had been at a party that night. He'd offered his sympathies with that same patronizing look from the dinner table. "Such bad luck, little brother." Now across the obsidian table, the truth of that night was an unspoken charge between us. "That was a long time ago," he said, his voice tight. "A data failure. A technical issue." "Was it?" I asked, my tone soft, lethal. "My understanding is the IT department found traces of a manually triggered erasure program executed locally. A major unforeseen challenge for the team's leader, wouldn't you say? How did you, as a team member, contribute to overcoming that obstacle?" He had no response. He just stared, sweat now visible on his brow in the cool, sterile light of the conference room. He was finally seeing me not as his brother, but as his rival. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned a page in the dossier, the sharp sound cutting through the heavy silence. "Let's move to teamwork. A cornerstone of our ethos here is nurturing talent, not suppressing it. Tell me about your approach to guiding junior colleagues with exceptional potential. How do you ensure they feel valued?" Before he could offer another empty platitude, I pressed on, my gaze piercing. "For instance, hypothetically, if you had a junior analyst on your team earning praise from senior leadership for their original ideas, would your mentorship involve, say, accessing their work after hours and subtly presenting their key insights as your own in a board meeting? Or perhaps leaking their initial proposal to a competitor via an anonymous account to undermine the project's success?" Each word was a precision strike, hitting memories only we shared. The stolen credit for the quarterly analysis that earned him a promotion. The promising acquisition deal that mysteriously collapsed after I'd shared my early findings with him. These weren't just accusations, they were evidence of his character. He was starting to hyperventilate, his breath short and ragged. The mask was gone. The polished, confident VP candidate was replaced by a cornered, frightened man. "Lucas, what is this?" he whispered, his voice breaking, using my name for the first time. It was a plea, a desperate appeal to the brother he thought he could manipulate. I ignored it. "This is a final round interview, Nathan," I said coldly, "and your responses are proving revealing. One last topic I'd like to cover is integrity. Our clients entrust us with their futures. Uncompromising integrity is non-negotiable. So tell me about Claire." The name sent him plummeting through another layer of reality. Claire had been my first serious girlfriend, a woman I'd cherished. Nathan had seduced her deliberately and cruelly, not because he cared for her, but because she was mine. He'd flaunted their fling in front of me for weeks before discarding her, a victory claimed purely to prove his dominance. "How," I continued, my voice a relentless blade, "would you describe the ethical reasoning that justifies pursuing a colleague's partner, not for love, but as an act of control? How does that decision-making align with fiduciary responsibility? When you see something you want, something that belongs to someone you deem inferior, what are the moral boundaries, if any, that stop you from taking it?" He broke. A strangled sob escaped his throat. "Please, Lucas, stop." "I'm not Lucas," I said, the words landing with the force of a blow. "In this room, I am Mr. Crest, the hiring manager. And you are a candidate who has shown a consistent, long-term pattern of unethical conduct, professional sabotage, and a profound lack of personal integrity. You don't build teams. You undermine them. You don't mentor. You steal. You don't lead. You control. Your entire career seems built on the belief that others' success is a resource to exploit or a threat to eliminate." I stood then, the motion signaling finality. The exhilaration coursing through me wasn't the hot, reckless thrill of vengeance I might have expected. It was a cold, clear, and absolute sense of righteousness. It was the feeling of a world set right. "Thank you for your time, Nathan," I said, my tone formal, conclusive. "I believe I have all I need to make my recommendation to the board." I looked down at him, a diminished, hollow figure lost in an expensive suit. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. The giant of my youth, the man who cast the long shadow, was just a bully facing a consequence he couldn't charm away. "My recommendation," I said, letting a faint trace of the brother he knew flicker in my eyes, "is that you are not and will never be a suitable fit for this firm. You lack the core character required to operate at this level. You lack the vision to see beyond your own ego. And you lack the decency to treat others as anything but tools." I walked toward the door, my steps firm and steady on the plush carpet. I didn't look back. As I stepped into the hallway, leaving him to be ushered out by the confused HR rep, I felt a weightlessness I hadn't known was possible. The burden that had pressed on my shoulders for 28 years, the relentless pressure of the shadow, was gone. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the hall and gazed out over the sprawling city below. It was all there, an endless expanse of opportunity. I realized then that the shadow was never his to cast. It was mine to step into. I had accepted his version of my world, of my value. The exhilarating truth wasn't that I had defeated him, it was that I had finally liberated myself. There was no shadow. There was only the light, and it was mine.